So let's open up a file called printing. Let's go to File, Open, Browse, C drive, Data folder, 5. It's called Printing. We're going to go through and set this document up for printing purposes. And we're going to go through all the printing features. The features we're going to cover is the page layout. So the page layout defines how the page is going to be laid out, the margins and orientation and stuff like that. So we're going to go through this menu in great detail. Then if you go to File, Print, then you have this screen. So then we're going to go through and show you some features in here that are rather useful. And the last one we're going to talk about is go to View, Page Layout, which we talked about in the very beginning of the class, is we're going to talk about headers and footers. And here's your header and footer here. So go back in the document area and go back to normal layout. We're going to kind of talk about those three screens. All right, so let's go and get started with that. I'm going to start with a few things first. Go to your page layout. We'll go to example 1. And of course, margins and orientation are pretty straightforward.
How do I change it back to normal?
Go to View. You have to click in the document area down here first, and then you go to the normal view.
Oh, okay.
If you're in the header,
and Andrew's back.
If you're in the header, then it's disabled. So you got to come and click on the document somewhere, then normal is available, and then you go back. That's probably kind of tricky because a lot of people ask me questions about that. They're saying, well, how do I get back type thing. You just have to kind of learn that. Okay, so we're back, and so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Page Layout tab, Margins and Orientation. So if you want to switch it to landscape, you can switch it to landscape. Those are fairly straightforward things. The size, now I'm going to start talking about these in a little more detail. The size is the paper size. And so one of the problems I run into is that the size of the paper is not listed here. And usually the problem exists because if you go to File, Print, it depends on what printer you're looking at. I'm looking at an Adobe printer. So if I switch this out and I went to maybe another printer here, go to this one here. Now, if this one supports larger paper like 11 by 17, now that you're looking at the right printer, the options for that printer is going to be listed here. So if that printer supported 11 by 17, you'd see an option here, but you've got to be looking at the right printer. That's the key of this one. So you'll get the proper options if you're looking at the right printer. Now this is one of those important commands, this print area. So how many of you have printed a document and ended up with like 20 blank pages? We've all done it. So if you go out to the right out here, way out here somewhere, and I put in some information. As far as Excel is concerned, that's part of the printout. So it's going to include that as part of the printout, plus all the blank pages between the two. That's how you get your blank pages. So if you get rid of this stuff, I'm going to delete it out of here. Problem is I left a couple of spaces out there. So see, there's actually some space characters out there. But they're there. And Excel says that's part of the printout. I'm going to print it with it. And all the blank pages in the middle. How do we get back to the home? Control Home key. That takes me back home. So what you want to do is you want to tell Excel what your printable area is. So I'm going to highlight this area. Now there's several ways to highlight the area. One way would be to click on cell A1. You can page down to the bottom, hold your Shift key down on the keyboard, click on the last cell, and that will highlight everything between. So you want to highlight everything first, and then we want to go through and set our print area. So essentially, you want to tell Excel, this is my printable area. Don't worry about any junk that's out there. So once you define your printable area, now Excel knows where the printable area is, and by default, it will print that particular area. So that is the print area. If you want to clear that and start a new area, you can clear it out and do it again. But now that I have my printable area defined, Excel will, by default, will print that. Now, if I go to File, Print, see, it shows me 1 of 6 pages because it's not including that junk that I put out there. So that is probably one more very important command to know about. The breaks. So I'm going to go to File, Print again. And if I page down a little bit, see District 8, looks like it fit okay. But District 17, I went down to page 2, is breaking onto 2 pages. So in other words, I want to push 17 to the next page. I don't want to be split in half between 2 pages. So that's what the page break is. So this is a manual page break. Come down to District 17. Click on District 17. Now see, there's the dotted line, as you can see. In mine, I show a dotted line. That tells me where it's actually breaking. But if you click on 17, go to your break and insert a page break, that will actually change the break above 17. So now when I do a print preview, 17 should be pushed on to the next page. Sometimes you might mess up all these page breaks, and so I can click on that and remove a single page break, or just remove them all and start over. So if I do a print preview right now, you can see that District 17 is no longer on page 2. It's been pushed off to page 3. So breaking is one of them. Background. Let's go through each one of these. Now, I did put a file in the C drive in the data folder. So if you navigate down to the C drive, into the data folder, I did put a confidential watermark. If you try putting the US flag out there, you're going to see it'll just be overwhelmingly busy. But you can go get watermarks. You can go out to the internet and search for watermarks, confidential draft, and you're going to find all sorts of them out there to download. But if we put a confidential statement in here and say insert, it actually puts a little confidential statement. Not too useful, but it might be useful if you have a specific situation where you want to leave it as draft and let people know that this is not in the final state. To remove that, you just hit delete background and it pops it out of there. Now, there's 2 things that are really important here. The print area is probably really important. And this one here is probably the second most important. And the reason why I do that is because what I want to do, if I were to print this again, with File, Print, but see these labels on top? How this is not repeated on the next page. You see, so and it makes it a little bit confusing because I don't know what these numbers represent. So just like we did that with the freeze pane, remember, we have to do that in the print area too. So that's what we're going to work on next. So that's your print titles. So you click on this little box that says rows to repeat on top. Now I don't want to repeat Mike's Sporting Goods over. I want to repeat these labels and maybe the blank row underneath. So I'll just highlight those 2, and that's going to put me a little space in between the label. And that puts this code over here. So again, I'm not typing anything over here. I'm just selecting in that little field where it says rows to repeat on top, and I'm highlighting the rows that I want to repeat on top. You say OK, or print preview. Now if I do a print preview at this point, there's my January, and it repeated those labels on every page. And just like Andrew mentioned a minute ago, is that the September and totals did not quite fit on the page. So we're going to have to shrink our page down a little bit, make it a little bit smaller by scaling it downward. So there's your titles. I think that is probably one of the most important features that if you deal with large databases, you want to do that. And the print error just causes you a headache. So here's your scale right there. Now, if you look at this dotted line on I, that tells me where it's actually breaking. So if I change it down to 95%, looks like it moved over a little bit. Now I'm going to go down to 80, 90. It looks like the 90 seemed to work. So if 90 doesn't work for you, then try to 85. You can even type in here to fine tune it a little bit more if you want to try 91 or 89. It looks like that dotted line disappeared. So the scaling is probably an important piece of this. So go to File, Print, and you can see that now my totals are fitting up there. Now we could have switched this to a landscape mode also, then we would have to make it bigger. So if the text is too small, then you might want to make it larger. Now you also notice on here that the gray, I call it a ghost background, the ghost lines I call them, these ghost lines sort of disappeared from the printout. So if you look at these options right next to it here, grid lines, looks like in the view mode, we're going to have the grid lines on. So if I turn that off, it turns them off there. But say you want them to be part of the printout, then I would turn on that checkbox. That means when I print it, it's going to display the view of the grid lines. Looks like the headings are being dropped from the printout view too. Print. So you see the headings A, B, C, D, and 1, 2, 3 are no longer being displayed because that was the other option we can use. Okay, let's come into this particular screen. And let me show you a couple of interesting options here. Two things that are probably are most misunderstood in this screen is one of them is down in the lower right corner is these two little buttons. And most people don't even know these buttons exist. They've been there since I know. And I've had people tell me that, I don't remember ever seeing those buttons before. And they're there. So if I turn on that margin, it puts the margins right on the screen. So in order for me to change the margins around, I have to actually go into my page setup, go to my margins, and move them this way. But the result is I can't see what I'm moving. It's all guesswork. But on this screen, I can grab that margin and move it over a little bit, give myself a little more room. So I could probably, if I moved it out to about there, I can probably bring it up to 95% scale. From a landscape perspective, that might work very well. So I can go back to my percentage and actually increase it a little bit. And we'll show you this in a little bit. I just want to point them out to you now. I'll go through another example in a minute. And the other one that's really important here is this option here called print selection. So the print selection is another one that is pretty useful. But I'll touch on that in a minute too. We'll come back to this. And what I probably want to do is talk about headers and footers right now, so we can apply headers and footers to the screen. Let's do that. There's two ways to do this. One is you go to Insert, and under the text field here, you have your headers and footers. What this button does is it simply just drops you into the print layout view. And this is the print layout view. So if you click out of it here, you can go to View, go back to Normal, or jump into the print layout view. Either way, it puts you into this header and footer screen. So there's several ways to get there. But once you're in this view, if you want to go back to normal, you have to click out of it and then go to normal. But we're going to put in some headers and footers. So somehow get to your header and footer page, click in the header box, and you'll notice that you'll have a new tab on top. Sometimes it's called design, and sometimes it's called header and footer. So it depends on the version you're using. So anyway, so there's my header and footer. Now these are tools associated with creating a header and footer. We're going to go and look at some of these, but right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my title in here. I'll call it my spread. Now, the nice thing about this particular screen is I can format this title and see how it fits with the rest of the document. So when I put that in, I can kind of see how big it needs to be in relationship to the document. In the other screen, it's guesswork. You're just sort of putting it in there. I'll show you that in a second too, but this here is the second. Now we want to go down to the footer of this screen. So we're going to go to our headers and footer tab, or our design tab, whichever one it says, and we can either go to header or go to footer. So we can physically move there, or we can just click on this little button and it jumps us to the footer or jumps us to the header. So you can kind of move around a little quicker in this header and footer screen. So we're going to the footer, and we're going to use a couple of different commands here. Now we don't want to type in a page number here. I don't want to type the word page 1 because this is going to appear on all pages. And I don't want page 1 to be written on every page. I want every page to show its own number. If it's page 2, I want to show page 2. So how you do that is you go up to this menu up here and you see it says page number. If I click on that little button there, a little code pops in here called ampersand square bracket page, close square bracket. Now if I click out of it, you can see that puts the number 1 in there. And then the other pages actually were updated too. So this is a code that puts the page number based on the page you're on. Now, so what I want to put here is not actually the page number. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to type in the word PAGE space, and then I can put in the page number. So that's going to type in the word page with a space and then the code page number. When I click out of it, you can see what it looks like. So we want to use the code to do this. Now I might want to also indicate how many pages are being printed. So if I double click on this again, go to the back end of it, say space of space, and then we want to put in the total number of pages. So we would click on this button right next to it called number of pages, and that puts another code in for the total number of pages. So this word here is a text string. This is a code of, and the code of all pages. So when I click out of it, you can see it puts 1 of 15. So that's how many pages I have. So if I end up with 14 pages, I know that some page is stuck in the printer somewhere. So that is how I would put the code in. Now click on the left or the right side. I'm going to click on the left side. This is the left box. Now a lot of times what we want to put in here is maybe the date, so that it automatically puts in the current date every time we print this document. So there is a code up here called current date. You click on that code, it puts in this ampersand date, which is a code that takes the computer clock date and plugs it into Excel. So that means every time I print, it's going to give me the new date. And that way we can keep our documents straight of which one was the latest version. Because sometimes we end up with a couple of printouts and we don't know which one is which. On the right side, the other thing I like to put in here is the file name. So this is the code for the file name. If I click out of it, you can see that it actually puts in the file name in there to find that file. That's important because why? If you have a printout of something and you want to make changes to it, you may not remember the file name. And so you can actually put the code in there so it will record the file name. Now, if you save the file to a different name, the code will update. And that's the valuable part of this, is you want it to be dynamic. So if I go to File, Save As, and I call this Printing Version 2. I give it a new name. I save it off. It actually updates the code with the new name. So if you go out and save a document as version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, then the proper name will be stamped on that document. That's the important part. And therefore, if you have to open up that file to make changes, then you'll know which file to open. Or maybe you have version 2, and you go to open version 2 and you find out there's a 3 and a 4. So you realize that this printout is the wrong document. It's the wrong printout because it's an older version. So you want to keep track of what file name it is. You also want to keep track of the date of that file. So does everybody get this all right? You understand what I'm saying on this? Any problems with this code? No?
I kind of missed how you got the page 1 of 15 on there. I kind of missed that part.
Well, let's start over. So I went in and typed in the word PAGE space, and then when we want to use the code for the page, there's a code called page number. So you type the word page, and then you want to put the page number code in there by clicking on it like that. And then we're going to say of what? I want to know the total number of pages that are out there. And the one right next to it called number of pages is the code for that. And so it looks like these are not actual text strings. These are actually code that actually can stick in there to look for those specific things.
Okay, I got that. Thank you.
Okay, good. So this is what I suggest is putting the date on there. These are things we might use on a regular basis because we want to have this information stamped on our document. Now to get out of the header and footer, you click in the document area, go to View, switch it back to a normal view. And now we're back to the normal view. So printing takes a little bit more work to manipulate the sheet because you have to make it fit on a page. So it's not like Word where you just print number of pages. Now I'm going to do one more thing here that is very significant. Let's say, for example, we don't want to print this whole page. We don't want to print maybe the first quarter. District 1 and District 2. That's all I want to print. I don't want to print the whole thing. I just want to print that little piece. So if you want to print that small little piece, you go to File, Print, and see the printer didn't recognize that little piece. That's because you have to change it to say I want to print the selected area. This is the only place where this command is written. And so if you want to print just a small area, people end up just printing the whole thing because they don't know how to print just a little area. But if I say I want to print just the selected area, then that's all I'm printing. So you can kind of customize it to a specific area. But the problem is now it isn't very well centered. So I can use my margin button to move these margins over and kind of move it over visually so it's sort of in the middle. See? If I want to scale it, make it a little bit bigger, I can do that without leaving the screen. You click on this page setup button at the very bottom. drops into this screen, and I can scale it up to maybe 110%. And that's a little bigger. So now I can move this over a little bit and kind of center it on the screen visually so I can see how that fits. That's where the margin button kind of works kind of nice, because something you want to just sort of visually kind of slide around. I don't know how wide this margin is. This could be an inch, this could be 2 inches, inch and a half. I don't know. I just know that it visually looks fine. And so that's where it's nice, so you don't have to guesswork at it. You can just actually just move these little buttons over and slide it around. So that is the print selection area. I think it's really important to know about. All right. So in the Courseware, I talk about this thing called page layout ribbon tab. So we go through that first. And then I go through the print preview screen. And then I went into the page setup. And then I went into headers and footers. The page setup isn't as useful. This was sort of came from the old Excel 2003 version. But there are some features on there that are a little bit redundant that you might want to use. Down in the header and footer, this is where I went through and talked about how to set up the header and footer, preview time. So I go through some examples of setting up your print header and footer. And you can go through these examples if you like. To show you this page setup, in the print layout view, there's a little arrow in the lower right corner, which is your page setup screen. So again, there's a lot of redundancy in here. It's kind of duplicate information. But if I click on that little arrow there, it actually goes into the page setup screen. And you can see that it's got portrait or landscape. We already did that over here. Here's your adjust to 100%. This autofit, some people like it, some people don't. I don't particularly care for it. I'd rather kind of adjust it, fine tune it a little bit more. Sometimes it does a good job, sometimes it doesn't. So it's kind of a 50-50 hit thing. Here's another way to do your margins. And here's another way to do your headers and footers. So this is a little different way. It's very similar, but this is the old way to do it. Doing it this way, I can't see the results. I have to actually exit out and go preview to see it. Or the other way, I could actually see it on the screen. The sheet one on the back, this is where we went to there a couple of times. There's our rows repeat on top. There's a couple of interesting things. There's another way to turn your grid lines on or off. You can also switch your black and white printer and draft quality. These were sort of designed, these have been around for a while. In the old days when toner was really expensive, some people would hit the draft copy and it wouldn't actually make it really dark. It would be sort of a draft copy. These days we just print them whatever, we just print whatever we want. So this is just another screen that you could use. Isn't really used that much, but once in a while you have to drop into it to use it. But most of the stuff can be done right up in here in this menu and also in the file print menu over in here, something over here. A little bit of redundancy here. Here's your portrait or landscape and all that way. Now let's switch this thing over to landscape. And let's print it in a landscape mode, but we got to sort of, we're going to have to make it fit better. So I'm going to say orientation, switch it to landscape. And then we're going to go to file print. And we have to switch this out. I want to print the entire worksheet. So it is fitting, but it needs to be scaled a little bit. So I'm able to make it bigger. I can kind of slide these down a little bit and maybe adjust it so it's a little tighter. This. I probably can come out a little ways here. Maybe, I don't know what it is now, but I think it's 110. Can go 120 maybe. So we can either go back to the print layout screen, or we can drop down to the page setup screen. And I select 110, so I'll try 120. I can probably go a little higher than 120. 125. That's pretty much it, I think. It gives me a little margin on the side out here. And I end up with 5 pages now. So that, now I do have some breaking problems. My district 5 needs to be split and pushed onto the next page. And then I might want to do that with some of the other districts too. So we have a couple of little things we need to adjust here. So if you print it out and it's too small, you can always switch it over to a landscape layout and print it that way. So that's pretty much it with printing.